My name is Hannah. I'm 29 years old and I live in Austin, Texas. I'm a registered nurse, and 3 weeks ago I walked down the aisle to marry the love of my life, Eli, a kindergarten teacher with the gentlest soul I've ever known. But on that day, the one I dreamed of since I was a little girl, 2 seats sat painfully empty. Not because someone got stuck in traffic, not because of a sudden emergency. They were empty because my parents chose not to come. I had saved them a front row spot, had their names printed in gold on cream-colored place cards, mother of the bride and father of the bride. But they never showed. Instead, they were in Hawaii, lounging by a pool with my brother Ryan and his picture-perfect family. They'd booked the trip months earlier. My mother said she'd gotten the dates mixed up. But the truth? They knew exactly when my wedding was. They just didn't think it was important enough to show up. That morning, when I looked out across the garden and saw those 2 seats, still tied with ribbon, still untouched, I felt something inside me snap. I tried to focus on Eli waiting for me at the altar, on the string quartet playing softly in the breeze. But all I could see were those chairs, like ghosts of a family I could never quite reach. Later, a relative told me what my father had said at dinner the week before. It's just a small wedding for a nurse and a kindergarten teacher, not exactly high society. That was the moment it all became clear. To them, I was always less than Ryan, less than their expectations, less than worthy of their time. But as I walked down that aisle, alone, I also realized something else. I wasn't broken. I wasn't small. I was done begging for their approval. This is the story of what happened after. The fallout. The confrontation, the truth, and how, for the first time in my life, I chose me. My name is Hannah. I'm 29 years old, and I live in Austin, Texas. And while that might sound like a simple piece of information, it actually defines everything you need to know about the distance, emotional and physical, that separates the life I live now from the one I was born into. I didn't move to Texas to escape my family, at least not at first. I came here for nursing school. I was 21, stubborn, hopeful, and too naive to realize how heavy my emotional baggage really was. I had one suitcase, a used car that barely made it out of Michigan, and a stack of flashcards tucked into the passenger seat. My first apartment had peeling linoleum, no AC, and a broken cabinet door that slammed open every time the dryer ran. But to me, it was freedom. Austin was loud, messy, unpredictable, and I loved it. Back in Grand Rapids, everything was curated. My parents' house looked like a magazine spread: beige walls, cream carpet, perfectly spaced picture frames of Ryan's college graduation, Ryan's wedding, Ryan's kids in matching outfits. They hadn't updated my high school photo in the hallway since I was 17. Ryan, my older brother, was the golden child, the legacy, Dad's pride and Mom's public relations dream. He went to the same university as our father, majored in business, graduated top of his class, and started climbing the corporate ladder before his diploma was even framed. Then he married Grace, a socialite with perfect skin, designer handbags, and a last name that unlocked country club memberships. Together, they built what my parents considered the blueprint of success: a $1.2 million house, 2 kids in private school, and an Instagram feed full of monogrammed Easter baskets and ski vacations in Aspen. And then there was me. I chose nursing. I chose to work night shifts. I chose to move across the country for a program that barely made a dent in the family dinner conversation. When I got accepted to nursing school in Austin, my dad barely reacted. He didn't even ask which hospital the clinicals were at. "Texas?" he said flatly. "Isn't that a bit far for what's basically a trade?" That one word, trade, echoed for years in my head, like nursing was welding or HVAC repair, like it was some fallback job for people who couldn't get into real programs. I tried to shake it off. After all, my patients didn't care what he thought. They cared that I showed up, that I knew their name, that I explained their medication in plain English when no one else did. I found purpose in the hard moments, when someone's father flatlined, when a mother miscarried, when a lonely patient lit up just because I remembered her birthday. But still, I wanted them to care, to see me, to say we're proud. So I kept calling, every Sunday. I'd tell Mom about a young boy I sat with through chemo, about the teenage car crash survivor who squeezed my hand in the ICU. She'd pause, then say something like, "Oh, how sweet. By the way, Ryan just got promoted again. He's leading a team now." Dad never asked how many lives I touched that week. But he did ask if I had considered eventually moving into hospital administration, maybe something more ambitious. Every conversation felt like an audition I didn't realize I was in. And then came Eli. We met volunteering at a children's reading event at the public library. He was wearing a wrinkled flannel and reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar with so much heart that half the kids were laughing on the floor. I knew immediately that he was different. That night we shared tacos and stayed up until 2 a.m., talking about nothing and everything. How he built his own reading program for underserved kids, how I handled grief at work, how neither of us fit into the boxes we were raised to check. He saw me, and not as someone who had failed to become the family trophy. He saw someone who mattered. We started building a quiet life together. Our apartment was small, but it was full of light, secondhand bookshelves, and plants we tried not to kill. Sunday morning pancakes became our ritual. Thursday nights were for wine and bad documentaries. On Saturdays, we'd drive out to hill country just to buy fresh peaches or find a new BBQ joint. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Still, I tried to bridge the gap. I took Eli home for Thanksgiving 2 years into our relationship. I prepped him, don't take offense, just smile, stay patient. But nothing could have prepared me for how cold it felt. My mother, always the picture of politeness, greeted him like he was a visiting handyman. "So, what grade do you teach?" she asked. "Kindergarten," Eli replied, smiling. "Oh, how adorable," she said before disappearing into the kitchen. At dinner, my father skipped past Eli entirely to ask me, "So what's your next step? You've been in that nursing job for a while now. Have you thought about doing something more?" There it was again. As if what I did, helping sick kids, holding the hands of dying veterans, advocating for patients who had no one, wasn't more enough. That night, Eli and I drove back to our hotel in silence. I kept blinking hard, trying not to cry, but he reached over, squeezed my hand, and whispered, "You don't need their approval. You've already built something they can't even see." Still, I kept hoping. I'd send holiday cards, I'd call Mom for her birthday. I even helped them figure out their Medicare paperwork one year when Ryan was too busy on a golf retreat. But no matter how much effort I poured in, the well came up dry. Every visit home was a reminder of the unspoken ranking system I could never rise in. Ryan got investments. I got advice. Ryan got celebration. I got toleration. Ryan got belief. I got silence. And maybe I could have kept pretending forever. Could have told myself they were just busy, or old-fashioned, or didn't understand how to show love. But then came my wedding. The moment that stripped away every excuse I'd made for them. The moment the front row seat sat empty, and all I could think about was this. I had crossed oceans to stay close, moved mountains to be seen. And all along I was swimming upstream in a current that was never meant to carry me. This life in Texas, it wasn't a backup plan. It was the only place I'd ever truly belonged. And the only family I needed was the one I was choosing now. When people say every family has a favorite, they usually mean it as a joke, a lighthearted way of poking fun at sibling dynamics. But in my family, it wasn't a punchline. It was a fact, and his name was Ryan. Ryan was born first, 3 years before me. He had the smile, the grades, the clean-shaven ambition that made adults nod approvingly at barbecues. He played soccer, was class president, aced every AP class, and never once forgot a thank you card after Christmas. From the moment he turned 16 and got a brand new SUV while I later received my cousin's hand-me-down sedan, I should have known the pattern was permanent. He was the golden child, not just to my parents but to the entire extended family. At holidays, everyone asked about his latest projects. When I tried to talk about work, my aunt would smile politely, then steer the conversation back to Ryan's latest stock picks or the newest private school his kids were applying to. When he got into the University of Michigan's business school, my father threw a party with custom banners. When I got into nursing school in Texas, I got a dry "that's nice" over the phone and a reminder to budget better. But it wasn't just the big milestones. It was everything in between. When Ryan turned 21, he got a Rolex. I got a $50 gift card to Macy's. When Ryan bought his first condo, they paid half the down payment. When Eli and I mentioned we were saving up for a house, my mom said, "Well, it's smart to start small. A rental might be best, don't you think?" When Ryan got a promotion, they hosted a formal dinner party with catered hors d'oeuvres and wine flights. When I passed my nurse practitioner certification, after years of night shifts and student loans, I got a text that said, "Congrats. Hope the new role isn't too stressful." It was always like that, and I kept telling myself not to care. That love wasn't a competition. That I didn't need balloons and banners and matching t-shirts to prove I mattered. But the human heart isn't a robot, you notice. You compare, you ache. Ryan was never cruel to me. That was the hardest part. He wasn't the villain in some soap opera, he was fine. Polite, occasionally even kind, but he never stood up for me either. Never once said, "Hey Mom, why do you talk to Hannah like that?" Never once stopped Dad from making his passive-aggressive jabs. Instead, he let the imbalance stay. Because it worked for him. I remember one moment that still stings. It was 2 years ago, during a family brunch at their country club. Eli and I had flown in for a visit. It was the first time in months the whole family was together. I had just been recognized at work for developing a pediatric palliative care protocol that saved our hospital time, money, and most importantly, lives. I was proud. Genuinely proud. My department head said I had redefined how we treat vulnerable patients. So over eggs Benedict and fresh berries, I tried to share. "I helped write a policy that's now being implemented across 3 hospitals," I said, smiling. My mother didn't even look up. "That's lovely, dear." Then, without missing a beat, she turned to Ryan and said, "So how's the new office renovation going?" And just like that, I disappeared again. Ryan launched into a story about new leather chairs and an espresso machine, and I just sat there, swirling orange juice in my glass and wondering why I even opened my mouth. Later that day, Eli asked me if I wanted to go no contact. "We can pull back," he said gently. "Just live our lives and stop trying to be seen by people who won't look." But I couldn't. Not then. Because somewhere inside me, the little girl who used to wave her report cards in the air still believed if I tried hard enough, they'd clap. If I achieved enough, they'd finally turn toward me. That belief stayed with me into adulthood, like a splinter under my skin I couldn't remove, even when I helped them financially. Yes, you heard that right. 3 years ago, my parents called in a panic. They were behind on their mortgage, bad investments, poor timing, the usual vague excuses. They said the bank was preparing foreclosure proceedings if they didn't come up with $25,000 in 2 weeks. And you know what the first thing out of my father's mouth was? "We already asked Ryan. But with the kids in private school and their vacation home, he can't help right now." They went to him first. Of course they did. And when he declined, they came to me. The afterthought, the fallback. Still, I said yes. I was saving for a down payment with Eli. We had nearly everything we needed. But after talking it through, really talking, we agreed I'd loan my parents the money. with a written agreement, $600 a month, interest-free. Not out of bitterness, but because it was responsible, because boundaries matter. My mom agreed. My dad hesitated, clearly offended that I wanted terms, but he signed anyway. For a while, they paid on time. And I allowed myself to believe, foolishly, that things were changing. My dad started calling me once a month. My mom asked for my chili recipe. Ryan even invited us over one Christmas. For a moment, it felt almost normal, like maybe I'd bought my way into the club. But nothing built on denial ever holds, because then came the engagement, the wedding planning. The moment Eli got down on one knee at the children's hospital, surrounded by hand-drawn signs from the kids we both loved, I called my parents the same night, crying with joy. I thought they'd be happy. My mom said, "He proposed where? At the hospital? That's different. You know, Ryan proposed to Grace during a private dinner at the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago, with a string quartet. And my father, he said nothing, no congratulations, no, we're happy for you, just silence." That was when I knew I was still a supporting character in my own story, because Ryan was the protagonist, always had been. I was the subplot. And when they booked a family trip to Hawaii that happened to fall, accidentally, conveniently, on the same weekend as my wedding, it was just another reminder. When I told my dad that the wedding was June 12th, he didn't apologize. He said, "We've invested a lot in this trip. Ryan has business opportunities in Honolulu." You understand, right? No, I didn't, and I never would. Because at the end of the day, I could give them money, I could achieve, I could save their damn house. But I'd never be Ryan. And to them, that meant I'd never quite be enough. That was the day something snapped. Not in anger, but in clarity. I realized that the pedestal Ryan stood on had nothing to do with who he was. It was built from expectations, from image, from the kind of success you can measure in square footage and LinkedIn updates. And no matter how kind or generous or competent I was, I would never climb up onto that pedestal because it wasn't mine to stand on. So I stopped trying, stopped sending updates they didn't read, stopped hoping they'd post about my milestones the way they gushed over Ryan's new car or Grace's Pinterest-perfect dinner parties. Instead, I looked around at what I'd built, a partner who respected me, a career that made a difference, a home that felt warm and safe, and a self I could finally live with. Ryan may always be the golden child, but I'm done living in the shadows. There's a strange power shift that happens when the people who've always made you feel small suddenly need you. It was a Tuesday afternoon, late summer. I had just gotten off a double shift. My scrubs were wrinkled, my feet hurt, and I had barely enough energy to reheat leftovers. Eli was out leading an after-school reading session, and I was looking forward to a quiet night of mindless television and early sleep. Then the phone rang. Dad flashed across the screen. That alone was unusual. He never called me, not directly. If I was lucky, I got looped into a group text with my mom about Thanksgiving seating charts or Ryan's kids' soccer schedules. I answered with a mix of curiosity and dread. "Hi, Dad." His voice was sharp, clipped. But beneath it, I heard something I'd never heard before. Panic. "Hannah, your mother and I are in a bit of a situation." Those were his exact words. A bit of a situation. As it turns out, a bit meant they were 3 months behind on their mortgage, facing the very real possibility of foreclosure. "Some unfortunate investments," Dad said vaguely. A few liquidity issues. The bank had issued a final warning. They needed $25,000 in the next 2 weeks or the house I grew up in, my childhood bedroom, the porch swing my mom decorated every fall, the kitchen where we celebrated 20 Thanksgivings, would be gone. My first instinct was disbelief. Not just because of the number or the timeline, but because, according to every Christmas newsletter my mom ever sent, they were doing great. Ryan's business was booming, the grandkids were thriving. They had just gotten back from a Caribbean cruise, and now, suddenly, they were on the edge of losing it all? I tried to catch my breath. "What about Ryan?" I asked. There was a pause, and then my dad cleared his throat. "We already asked him." Of course they had. And? With the kids in private school, their renovation, and the new investment property, he can't help right now. I could practically see the words forming on my dad's tongue before he said them. "We were hoping you could." I didn't say yes right away, not because I didn't want to help, but because for once in my life I needed to think before giving. I had spent my entire adult life overextending myself to people who saw my kindness as a resource, not a choice. I wasn't going to hand over $25,000 just because I'd been trained to say yes before asking why, so I told him I'd think about it and hung up. When Eli got home, I laid it all out for him, the amount, the situation, the fact that Ryan had turned them down. And you know what he said? "What do you want to do?" Not what was fair, not what we should do, but what I wanted. And that was the moment I realized no one had ever asked me that before. Not when I picked my career, not when I chose where to live, not even when I got engaged. Every major decision had been filtered through other people's expectations, so I sat with it. And what I wanted was to help. But on my terms. Eli and I had been saving for a down payment on a modest home, nothing fancy, just something we could call ours. We had just enough to make it happen. But I knew if we lent them the money, we'd have to put that dream on hold. Still, it was my parents, the ones who raised me. The ones who didn't come to my graduation, didn't clap for my promotions, didn't show up for my engagement, but still, my parents. So I called them back. "I'll help," I said. "But this will be a loan, not a gift, $600 a month until it's paid off. And we'll write it down, all of it, signed. I expected a thank you." Instead, my father scoffed. "A contract? Really, Hannah?" "Yes," I said. "Really. It's not about trust," I added. "It's about clarity, boundaries." He grumbled something about family not needing paperwork, but my mother, surprisingly, cut in and said, "That sounds reasonable." We met over Zoom the next day. I walked them through the agreement. It wasn't anything fancy, just something I found online and adapted. Principal amount, $25,000, no interest. Monthly repayment, $600. Start date, September 5th, signed by both parties. They emailed back the scanned copy, signatures and all. And just like that, I became their lifeline. For the next few months, the payments came like clockwork. Every 5th of the month, I saw the deposit hit my account. No phone calls, no thank yous, just transactions. Clinical. Unemotional. But something weird happened along the way. My father started calling again. Not often and not long, but enough. He'd ask how work was, mention a recipe my mom had tried. Once he even asked how Eli's school was doing. It was small, but it felt like progress. Maybe this was what growth looked like, I told myself. Maybe people can change. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel hopeful. It felt like maybe, just maybe, my act of generosity had opened a door that had been locked since childhood. We went home for Christmas that year. My mother gave Eli a tie. My dad asked about our apartment. Ryan wasn't there, ski trip in Vermont, but the house felt different, softer, less like a museum of all the ways I didn't measure up. And for a little while, things were okay. But the thing about people who only love you conditionally is, the moment the conditions change, so does their affection. Because when the wedding planning started, so did the unraveling. At first it was subtle. Mom forgot to RSVP to the bridal shower. Dad made a sarcastic comment about people who waste money on small weddings with no ROI. I brushed it off. They were old school, I told myself. They didn't mean harm. But then came the real blow. Hawaii. They had booked a family vacation with Ryan's family the same week as my wedding. When I called to confirm the date, my mother said casually, "Oh, honey, we already paid the deposit. You know how tricky it is to get everyone's schedule aligned." When I reminded her it was the weekend of our wedding, she went quiet. Then said, "Well, the trip is already locked in. I'm sure you understand." I didn't. I don't think I ever will. Because while I stood at the altar trying not to cry as 2 chairs sat empty, I remembered something Dad had said during our loan call. We've invested too much to lose the house. And now, suddenly, I saw the hypocrisy in full color. I had invested too, time, money, hope, and what I got in return was a vacation photo of my parents drinking Mai Tais while I walked down the aisle alone. The contrast was blinding. I had saved their home, but they couldn't even show up for mine. And it was in that moment, on that empty aisle, heart-pounding, that I understood the brutal truth. They didn't love me the way I needed. They loved me the way I was useful. And that's not love at all. When Eli proposed, it wasn't a grand spectacle. There were no candlelit rooftops, no flash mobs, no private photographers hiding in bushes waiting to capture the perfect social media moment. There was just me, a long hallway in the pediatric ward, and 23 kids holding construction paper signs that said, "Will you marry my favorite teacher's favorite nurse?" I was wearing scrubs. I smelled like antiseptic. I hadn't even brushed my hair since 6 a.m., and yet it was the most beautiful moment of my life. I turned the corner, and there he was, Eli, down on one knee with the biggest, most hopeful smile I'd ever seen. Behind him, my co-workers stood silently in tears. The kids giggled and clapped, and I said yes through a blur of disbelief and mascara running down my face. It was real, it was raw, it was us. That night, we ordered pizza and danced barefoot in our kitchen. It wasn't flashy, but it was perfect. When I called my parents to tell them, I was still glowing, practically breathless with joy. My mother answered the phone. "Hi, Mom, he proposed." There was a pause. Then she asked, "Where?" The children's hospital." "He coordinated it with the kids. It was so sweet." Another pause. "At the hospital?" she said. "During your shift?" My heart sank. "Yeah," I replied. "He had the kids help." "It was really special." That's certainly unique," she said. Then came the comparison. "Your brother proposed to Grace at the Ritz-Carlton, remember? Private rooftop dinner, live string quartet. He even had a professional photographer fly in from Chicago. Grace still says it was the most romantic night of her life." She said it like she was offering a helpful benchmark, like she expected me to say, "Oh, wow, that does sound better." But I didn't, because I wasn't measuring my life against Ryan's anymore. At least not consciously. Still, her words stung. I moved on to Dad. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd surprise me. He didn't. When I told him we were engaged, his first question wasn't, "When's the wedding?" or "How did he propose?" It was, "Does he have a ring?" I blinked. "Yes," I said. "A beautiful one. He saved for months." "How much did he spend?" Dad, I don't know." That's not really the point. But it was the point. To them, value was always measured in price tags and presentation. What came next was even worse. "Well," he sighed, "I guess congratulations are in order. Just make sure you plan something appropriate." Weddings are about family reputation, too. Family reputation, like my marriage was a corporate merger and he was concerned about public optics. I hung up the phone and cried in the hallway. Eli found me 20 minutes later, still in scrubs, still shaking. "Do you regret calling them?" he asked softly. I shook my head. "No. I think I regret expecting them to care. That should have been enough to stop me. But like every little girl who once believed her parents hung the moon, I still wanted them to be involved. I still hoped, despite everything, they'd show up for this. So I invited my mom to go dress shopping. We planned it weeks in advance. I sent her the address, reminded her twice. The night before, she texted, "Sorry, sweetie, bridge club. Been on the calendar forever. Can't reschedule. Bridge club." My future mother-in-law, Margaret, came instead. She cried when I stepped out of the dressing room in that A-line ivory gown with lace sleeves and a subtle train. The way she looked at me, like I was already family, almost undid me. I sent pictures to my mom. She replied, "It's simple. Have you considered something more formal?" "Grace wore Vera Wang, you know." "Yes, Mom, I remember. You posted it on Facebook with a 3-paragraph caption and 300 photos." Every conversation about the wedding circled back to that wedding. Ryan and Grace's 7-layer royal gala of a day. They had over 300 guests. A string quartet during cocktail hour and a jazz band at the reception, centerpieces that cost more than my dress, a custom donut wall, and a venue in downtown Detroit that looked like it had been ripped out of a luxury bridal magazine. Eli and I were planning a modest ceremony in a botanical garden. 70 guests. A local string duo, catering from our favorite family-owned restaurant. We were more concerned about having good vows and better people than imported orchids or drone footage. But every time I shared a detail with my parents, I felt like I was submitting a budget proposal that kept getting rejected. "We're just trying to help you think long-term," my mom would say. "What kind of crowd will you even have?" Dad asked once. "Is it worth putting that much effort into it?" Into it. He said it like it was a charity picnic, not the day I pledged my life to the man I loved. Still, I kept including them. I sent the save the dates. I called with updates. I gave them first pick of hotels nearby. I asked for their opinion on centerpieces, music, and seating charts. Sometimes I got silence. Other times I got reminders of what Ryan and Grace had done better. But no enthusiasm, no warmth, no real investment. It was as if they had already decided this wedding, my wedding, didn't measure up. And that's when I realized something hard and sharp and awful. This wasn't just about taste or timing or logistics, it was about value. In their eyes, my marriage wasn't worth celebrating, because it didn't fit the picture. Eli wasn't wealthy. He didn't have connections. He wasn't going to bring the Carter name into higher social circles. He just brought me joy, and that, apparently, wasn't enough. A week before the RSVP deadline, I asked my mother directly, "Are you and Dad coming to the wedding?" She paused. "We'll have to check. Your father's schedule is complicated these days." "You've had the date for months." "I know, sweetie. It's just complicated. I didn't press, I already knew the truth. They weren't proud. They weren't excited, and they definitely weren't coming. But I still held on to a sliver of hope. Because hope dies slowly, especially when it's been your only lifeline for years. It wasn't until 3 months before the wedding that everything finally broke. During a regular Sunday check-in, my mom casually mentioned they were booking flights to Hawaii for a family trip with Ryan and Grace. I froze. "When?" I asked. "The 2nd week of June," she replied. My throat went dry. "That's my wedding weekend." A beat of silence. "Oh dear," she said. I must have gotten the dates confused. I didn't say anything, because what could I say? She continued as if offering a compromise. "Well, it's too late to change now. The kids are looking forward to it. Ryan took time off work. You understand, right?" No, I didn't, and I never would. There are moments in life that don't break you immediately. They crack something beneath the surface and keep widening with time. The call about Hawaii was one of those moments. It was a Sunday afternoon in March, 3 months before my wedding. Eli was in the kitchen making grilled cheese sandwiches. The apartment smelled like basil and garlic, the kind of small, quiet comfort that felt like home. My phone buzzed. It was Mom. I answered, half smiling. Maybe, just maybe, she was finally going to ask what dress I picked, or tell me they'd booked their flights. Maybe it was a moment of connection, like we were finally crossing the bridge I'd been building alone for years. Instead, she said, "We're finalizing plans for our summer trip. We're all so excited. Ryan booked a beachfront rental in Maui. It's going to be gorgeous." My stomach twisted. "When are you going?" I asked. "Oh, let me check. Second week of June." My hand gripped the edge of the counter. That's my wedding week," I said slowly. There was a pause, and then the same rehearsed detachment I'd heard 100 times before. Oh dear, I must have mixed up the dates. "Well, it's too late now. The kids are looking forward to it. Ryan already got time off." That was it. "No, we'll see what we can do. No, we'll change the dates." Just a shrug wrapped in a sweet voice and served cold. I hung up and stared at the wall, Eli's voice muffled in the background. I couldn't even process what had happened. My own parents had prioritized a beach trip with my brother over my wedding, and treated it like forgetting a dentist appointment. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, wondering how many chances I'd given them. How many times I'd swallowed disappointment, convinced myself that this time would be different. It wasn't. The next morning, I called my dad. I didn't want to, but I had to hear it from him. "Dad," I said, voice shaking, "Mom told me you're going to Hawaii during my wedding weekend. Is that true?" He didn't even hesitate. "Yes," he said plainly. "We've invested a lot in this trip. It's been in the works for months." I swallowed hard. "But it's my wedding." His voice turned cool, professional, like we were discussing a business meeting that had to be rescheduled due to a conflict. "Hannah, we had to prioritize. This trip is important. Ryan has networking opportunities there. It's not just a vacation." My voice cracked. "More important than your daughter's wedding?" He sighed. "Don't be dramatic." And then, he said the words that would live in my chest for months. "It's just a trivial event, Hannah. You and Eli, you're not merging empires. You're a nurse. He's a kindergarten teacher. This isn't exactly a high-profile occasion." I don't remember hanging up. I just remember the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears and the feeling of something snapping clean in half inside me. For years, I had tried to tell myself that their indifference wasn't personal, that they just didn't know how to show love. That maybe I wasn't explaining myself well enough, that if I just tried harder, did more, proved my worth, they'd come around. But this wasn't about misunderstanding. This was clarity. They didn't think I was worth showing up for. They didn't respect my career, or my relationship, or me. And suddenly I saw it all. The birthday cards signed late, the backhanded compliments, the constant comparisons to Ryan, the "you should be more ambitious" lectures, the way my father still looked right through Eli at every family event. All of it. It wasn't oversight, it was choice. Intentional. And so I made a choice too. We moved forward with the wedding, with or without them. Eli never once flinched. "This is about us," he said when he saw the devastation in my eyes. "Not them. We're getting married for love, not likes." My future in-laws, Margaret and Robert, stepped in without being asked. They helped with catering calls, guest list logistics, even picked up linen samples when I had to work late. They showed up in ways my own parents never had. My best friend Riley became my unofficial maid of honor and emotional bodyguard. When I showed her the text from my mom confirming they were sticking to the Hawaii plan, she said, "They don't deserve to be there, but you deserve the day of your dreams." The day I went to pick up my dress, Margaret came with me. She brought tissues. She held my hand. She said, "We are so lucky to be gaining you." I cried in the dressing room, because it was the kind of thing I had always dreamed of hearing from my own mother. And then there were the small moments that kept me going, Like the florist who threw in extra wildflowers for free. Like the hospital custodian Mark, who overheard me venting during a break and showed up the next day with a bouquet from his wife's garden. Like the nurse who covered my shift the week of the wedding so I could breathe. Each act of kindness stitched me back together. I told myself over and over again, this day is about love. Not approval, not status, just love. Still, hope is a hard thing to kill. A part of me, small, desperate, kept checking my inbox, half expecting an email, a plane ticket. A change of heart. Nothing came. Until 2 days before the wedding. A large box arrived at our apartment. Inside was a card. No message, just congratulations in cursive. And a set of silver-plated serving utensils from a department store registry I hadn't even created. It felt more like a corporate write-off than a gesture of love. That same night, I saw a post on my mom's Instagram. Ryan and Grace smiling on a beach. My parents in the background holding margaritas. The caption read, "Family time is everything." The comments were worse. "Beautiful family. So glad you're all together. There's nothing more important than being with your kids." I stared at the screen, tears blurring the edges. I wasn't even in their definition of family, not even on the map. That was when I blocked their accounts, not out of spite, but for survival. I couldn't keep inviting pain to the table and calling it hope. The night before the wedding, Eli held me close and whispered, "You are not what they failed to see. You are what you chose to become despite it." And he was right. I had made a life out of love, out of kindness, out of showing up for others even when the people I needed most never showed up for me. So I went to bed that night with my heart raw but full. And when the sun rose on our wedding day, I didn't think about the 2 empty seats. I thought about Eli, about our love, and the life we were choosing to build together, with or without their blessing. The morning of my wedding, the sun rose like it had something to prove. Texas skies have a way of showing off in June. The light broke through our bedroom window, soft and golden, painting warmth across my bare arms. For a moment I lay still, my breath slow, my heart steady, trying to hold on to the peace before the day unfolded. It was here, the day I would marry Eli. And my parents were not coming. That fact sat quietly beside me like an unwanted guest, no longer screaming, no longer surprising, just present. There had been no last-minute phone call. No teary apology, no showing up at the garden with flowers in hand and regret in their eyes like in the movies. There were only 2 seats at the front of the ceremony reserved for mother of the bride and father of the bride, and I knew they would remain empty. Still, I got out of bed. Still, I showed up. Because love, real love, moves forward even when it limps. Eli had left a note on my nightstand. In his familiar, slightly crooked handwriting, he wrote, "Next time I see you, you'll be wearing white, and I'll be the luckiest man alive." I clutched the note to my chest like armor. My best friend Riley arrived an hour later with coffee, bagels, and a playlist titled Badass Bride Energy. She danced around my living room in a robe, making jokes, making space, for me to cry, to breathe, to just be. My bridesmaids, colleagues from the hospital, nursing school sisters, filled the room with laughter and the smell of hairspray. It was chaotic and beautiful. They weren't my blood, but they were my family, the kind that shows up. I sat by the window while Jennifer, one of my oldest friends from residency, helped me with my makeup. She handed me a small blue box. "I know you said you didn't have something borrowed," she said softly. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. It belonged to my grandmother. She was a nurse during World War II. She always said nursing wasn't a job, it was a calling. She would have loved you. My throat tightened. That bracelet felt heavier than gold. It felt like validation. By the time the dress was zipped, the vows packed, the flowers delivered, I was shaking, but not with fear, with a kind of electric anticipation that pulsed through every part of me. This was it. This was our day. The ceremony was at a botanical garden just outside Austin. The sun was kind, casting soft shadows through oak branches. Wildflowers lined the aisle, bluebonnets, sunflowers, baby's breath, the exact bouquet I'd imagined. Guests began to arrive, co-workers, neighbors, Eli's students, and their parents. Some brought cards, others brought casseroles, all brought love. And then came Robert, Eli's dad. He found me just minutes before the ceremony. "Hannah," he said gently, "I know this isn't how you pictured today, and I won't pretend to replace someone who should have shown up for you, but I would be honored to walk you down that aisle, if you'd like." I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who had called me daughter from day one, who sent me jokes via text just to make me laugh, who always asked how my shift went and actually listened to the answer. Then I looked at the arch, at the aisle, at the empty seats, and I knew what I needed to do. "Thank you," I said. "But I think I need to walk it alone. Will you sit in the front row, though, where they would have sat?" He smiled, eyes misting. "We'd be honored." And then the music changed, the guests stood, and I took that first step. Alone, but not lonely, each step felt like a declaration. That I was enough, that love doesn't have to come from blood to be real, that I was no longer waiting for someone to save me from invisibility. When I reached Eli, his eyes were already wet. He took my hand like he'd been waiting his whole life for that moment. Maybe he had. The ceremony was short and simple. We wrote our own vows. He promised to dance with me in the kitchen until we're 80. I promised to never let the world make him feel small. We both promised to build a home where kindness lived on the walls and forgiveness bloomed in every room. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," I heard the guests cheer, but it felt like the whole world had gone still. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was proving anything. I was just being, and that was enough. At the reception, we danced under string lights in a garden full of fireflies. I danced with Robert. When the music slowed, I whispered, "Thank you for being here, for being who you are." He pulled back slightly, eyes soft. "Thank you for being the daughter we always wanted." Later, I caught a glimpse of Margaret, Eli's mom, helping stack plates, laughing with my co-workers, hugging a shy student who came to see Mr. Eli get married. She didn't post photos for clout. She didn't care about the venue's prestige, she just showed up. At one point, Riley grabbed me by the shoulders and said, "You did it, Hannah. You built a life without them. Look around." And I did, and she was right. There were people everywhere, eating, laughing, clinking glasses, people who had chosen to stand with us, who had RSVP'd with joy, not obligation. The photographer, a friend of a friend named Marcus, pulled me aside later to show me a candid shot. It was me, mid-laugh, surrounded by my bridesmaids, Eli in the background making a silly face. "You should frame this one," he said. I stared at it. I didn't look broken. I looked alive. After the cake had been cut and the last song played, Eli and I stood outside the garden under a blanket of stars. "Still want to spend forever with me?" I asked, only half joking. He grinned. "Especially now, you're terrifyingly strong." I leaned my head on his shoulder, and for once there was no ache. No sense of loss, just peace. We went home that night, changed out of our wedding clothes, and made grilled cheese sandwiches in our pajamas. No fanfare, no spectacle, just love. And as I drifted off to sleep, Eli's arm wrapped around me, I realized something that felt quietly revolutionary. You don't need a perfect family to have a perfect beginning. You just need truth, and the courage to walk, maybe even alone, towards something better. 1 month after the wedding, just as the last of the thank you cards had been mailed and the flowers from our reception had dried between book pages, the phone rang. It was my dad. For a second I froze. He hadn't called before the wedding. He hadn't sent a message the day of. He hadn't so much as liked the one picture of me and Eli someone else had tagged him in on Facebook. So why now? I debated ignoring it, letting it go to voicemail. But curiosity, or maybe habit, won out. "Hello?" I answered, cautious. "Hannah," he said briskly, like this was a business call. "I'm calling about the deposits." I blinked. "What deposits?" He exhaled, frustrated. "We haven't received any for the last 2 months." "Your mother checked with the bank. There's been no activity. Is there a problem?" And in that moment, something inside me recoiled so violently I nearly dropped the phone. He wasn't talking about the loan I gave them. He was talking about money he thought I owed him, like I was supposed to be sending him regular deposits, like I was their personal ATM. "Dad," I said carefully, "I think you're confused." "No," he said, voice tightening. "I'm very clear. We haven't received the usual $600 since May. June and July are both missing." My hands were shaking. "Because you're supposed to be paying me. You remember, right? The $25,000 I loaned you to save the house?" Silence. Dead, heavy silence. Then dismissive laughter. "Oh, Hannah, that was a family gift." "We never agreed to long-term repayments. That's not how families operate." "No," I said, anger rising. "We did agree. We signed a document. I still have the PDF. It says $600 per month until it's repaid." "You signed it, so did Mom," he scoffed. "Technicalities. You know your mother and I were under immense stress at the time." "So was I," snapped. "And I still helped you, because I believed helping didn't mean becoming invisible. But now you've skipped 2 payments, ignored my messages, and you're standing here acting like I owe you something?" And then he said it. The ask that turned everything upside down. "Ryan's having a hard time," he said. "His business is in trouble. Grace isn't working right now and the kids' tuition is due. We're trying to help them keep things afloat." I almost laughed. This couldn't be real. "You want me to give Ryan money?" I said. "Not give," he corrected. "Just contribute. You've always been generous. Your brother's family is struggling and it's time to step up again." I was speechless. "You skipped my wedding," I finally said. "You dismissed my career. You ignored the man I married. You defaulted on a loan, and now you're asking me to bail out the favorite son? Are you even hearing yourself?" "This isn't about favoritism, Hannah. It's about family. Ryan has responsibilities. You don't have children. You have more flexibility." More flexibility. It hit me like a slap. He didn't see me as someone with boundaries, a life, a future. He saw me as a financial resource, a silent benefactor, a backup plan. And in that moment, I realized the only reason he was calling now was because the cash flow had stopped, not because he missed me, not because he regretted missing my wedding, not because he wanted to repair anything, because the money had stopped. "Dad," I said slowly, "you're going to repay the money. Every last cent. And if I don't see the missed payments in my account by the end of the month, I'll take the next step." "What does that mean?" he said coldly. "It means I'll get legal involved." "You're threatening your own family?" "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself from people who've stopped behaving like family." He hung up. No goodbye, no resolution. Just static. I sat in the kitchen staring at my phone, Eli quietly washing dishes behind me. When I told him what happened, he didn't even look surprised. "They were never going to honor that agreement," he said, "not once they thought they didn't need to." That night, I emailed a copy of the original loan document to both my parents. The subject line was simple: "Payment reminder, loan agreement, May-June installments missing." The next morning, I received 3 emails. One from my dad, accusing me of being cold and transactional. One from my mom, begging me not to embarrass the family. And one, most surprising, from Ryan. His subject line? "Not cool, sis." His message: "Mom and Dad told me what you're doing. You're putting them under stress during an already difficult time. You think you're helping. You're making everything worse. I thought you were better than this." I stared at the screen, nauseated. This was the golden child, the one who had always received, never given, suddenly weighing in. I wanted to scream or cry or both. Instead, I replied, "This is between me and our parents. I suggest you stay out of it." He fired back within minutes. "Everything in this family is about all of us. You're punishing our parents because of some wedding drama. Grow up." The audacity was staggering. He had skipped my wedding for a vacation. He had accepted help from our parents, knowing full well they were in debt to me. He had never acknowledged the loan, not once. And now I was the villain? I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked his number. That same night, I sat down with Eli and opened a blank email. Subject line: "Legal consultation request." I was done playing nice. Done waiting for people to do the right thing. It was time to protect myself. They say boundaries are bridges to healthier relationships, but what they don't tell you is, sometimes they become walls. Protective, necessary walls, especially when those you're setting them with are family. After that last phone call with my dad, the one where he demanded more money while still owing me tens of thousands, I knew something had shifted, permanently. There would be no more polite conversations. No more emotional gymnastics trying to explain why I mattered. I was done asking to be respected. It was time to require it. And so, for the first time in my life, I did something unthinkable in our family. I lawyered up. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about peace. I contacted Meredith Walsh, a local attorney a colleague of mine had recommended. Her office was in a renovated Victorian near downtown. Warm wood floors, soft lighting, framed certificates lining the wall. Everything about the place felt calm and measured. The opposite of what my heart was doing in my chest. When Meredith greeted me, she didn't blink at the phrase "family loan dispute." She nodded like she'd heard it 1,000 times and probably had. We sat in a quiet conference room while I laid everything out. The original $25,000, the contract, the repayment history, the sudden silence, and now, the gaslighting and guilt-tripping from everyone involved. She reviewed the document carefully. "This is solid," she said. "Signed, dated, and you have clear evidence of payment history for almost 3 years. That proves intent and mutual understanding. You're in a strong position." I exhaled. Hard. It was the first time someone had said those words to me without a but. "What do we do next?" I asked. "We begin with a formal demand letter," she explained. "Professional, direct, and completely unemotional. It sets the tone. If they respond and repay, great. If not, we escalate." She pulled out a sample and let me help shape the language. We wrote it together. A clear timeline of the loan, acknowledgement of missed payments, a reference to the signed agreement, and a demand to bring the account current within 30 days, or else further legal action would be pursued. I signed the final draft. Meredith had it notarized and sent via certified mail, and just like that, the boundary became real, not a conversation. Not a hope, not a wish, a line in ink. I didn't expect my parents to react well, but I wasn't prepared for the full force of what came next. 3 days later, my inbox exploded. My dad emailed first, cold, clipped, and full of veiled threats. "It's disappointing to see you turn on your own family. Legal documents." "Really? I'd caution you to think about the long-term damage you're doing." My mom sent hers a few hours later. "Hannah, I'm heartbroken. After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat us? We are your parents. We made sacrifices. Now you're using lawyers against us?" And then, the extended family chimed in. Aunt Patricia. Your poor mother is devastated. She hasn't stopped crying. Uncle Gerald. Your father helped pay for your car in college. How can you be so ungrateful? Even my cousin Derek, who I hadn't spoken to in 2 years, texted me, "Not cool airing family issues like this. You're better than that." It was like someone had fired the family flare gun. I wasn't just defending a legal agreement. I was now defending my character, but I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I forwarded every message to Meredith. She emailed back, "Classic flying monkey behavior. Don't engage, we stay on the path." And so we did. Meanwhile, Eli wrapped me in steady, unwavering calm. "This isn't drama," he said one night while making tea. "This is you choosing to not be used anymore." Still, the guilt tugged at me. The fear, the whisper in the back of my head that said, "What if they're right? What if you're being too harsh?" So I brought it to Dr. Bennett, my therapist. She listened. Patient, quiet, then said, "You're not cutting them off. You're holding them accountable. Those are very different things." That sentence became my mantra. You're not cruel. You're clear. And clarity is never something people who rely on your confusion will appreciate. Then came Ryan. Again, this time he didn't email. He called. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that started passive-aggressive and ended full-blown hostile. "You're embarrassing this entire family. You've lost sight of what matters. Grace and I are doing our best, and you're dragging us all down because you're still bitter about some wedding." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not without saying things I'd regret. Instead, I wrote it all down. Every interaction, every message, every subtle threat and guilt-laced plea. Meredith compiled it into a timeline. And still, no payments. 2 weeks passed, then 3. And on day 28, just before the deadline, my dad responded via email, not to me but to Meredith. The tone was different, more restrained. He acknowledged the loan. He disputed the way things have been handled, but said they intended to bring the account current. No apology, no admission of wrongdoing. Just a concession to avoid escalation. Meredith responded with professional cheer, "Thank you. We look forward to the first repayment within the next 7 business days. Please be advised that future missed payments will trigger automatic legal action per Clause 4 of the agreement." It was done, well, started. Because recovering the money was just the beginning. The bigger journey was this. For the first time in my life, I had enforced a boundary with my family, and it held. They pushed. They guilted. They threw the full weight of generational dysfunction at me, and I stood, not alone, with Eli, with Margaret and Robert, with Riley, with Dr. Bennett, with the version of myself I'd spent years becoming. And in that strength, I saw something unexpected. I didn't feel bitter. I felt free. Not because they'd changed, but because I had. I no longer needed to be the good daughter if that meant sacrificing myself. I no longer needed to be their emotional first responder or their financial plan B. I didn't need to be polite when I was being manipulated. I didn't need to stay small just to keep the peace. And most importantly, I didn't need to justify my boundaries to people who had never respected them in the first place. So I stopped explaining. I started living. And every time the next month's deposit arrived in my account, on time, without commentary, I smiled. Not because I needed the money, but because I had claimed something far more valuable: my power. I used to believe that family was unconditional, that no matter how hard things got, no matter the disappointment, the favoritism, the silence, family would eventually come around, that if I just proved myself worthy enough, they'd meet me halfway. But I don't believe that anymore. Now, I believe in earned proximity, and I believe in building a family not from shared blood, but from mutual respect, kindness, and people who show up. After the demand letter, after the repayments resumed, something inside me settled. Not because I'd won. Not because they finally said sorry. Because they didn't. But because I stopped needing them to. Ryan and I haven't spoken since his last voicemail. Grace sent me a Christmas card with no personal note, just their names printed at the bottom. I didn't send one back. My parents now send their payments on time every 5th of the month. No messages, no drama, just money owed being returned. It's strangely quiet, and honestly, that's the healthiest our relationship has ever been. I still live in Austin with Eli. We just closed on our first home, a sunny, modest bungalow with a wild little garden and a creaky screen door. It's not fancy. It's not what my parents would consider impressive, but it's ours, and it's full of love. Margaret and Robert come by every Sunday for dinner. Robert brings dad jokes. Margaret brings pie. They treat me like a daughter, not because they have to, but because they want to. I never expected to find parental warmth this late in life, but maybe some of the best things come when you finally make space for them. Riley, my ride or die, is now Lily's godmother. And yes, I said Lily, our daughter. I found out I was pregnant 6 months after the wedding. Eli cried when I told him. We both did, because it felt like something beautiful growing out of the hardest year of our lives. When Lily was born, the hospital staff cheered like I was royalty. Jennifer gave me back the silver bracelet she'd let me borrow on my wedding day. "It belongs to your daughter now," she whispered. And she was right, because Lily will never have to wonder where she stands. She won't be ranked against anyone. She won't earn our love. It'll be hers from the beginning. When I told my parents about the pregnancy, they were measured, respectful. No assumptions, no guilt. They waited for an invitation, and for once, I set the terms. We agreed. If they wanted to be in Lily's life, they'd follow our rules. No undermining, no favoritism. No passive aggression disguised as concern. And to their credit, they complied. Small, quiet efforts. Modest gifts, short visits, but most importantly, respect. We're not close. We probably never will be. But now, that distance isn't filled with longing or resentment. It's filled with peace, because I'm not running toward them anymore. I'm walking forward, with Eli, with Lily, with the family we've built. And I know now, I am not the sum of who didn't choose me. I am the product of every moment I chose myself. If this journey has taught me anything, it's this. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who make you feel the smallest. And when that happens, you face a choice. Keep shrinking to fit their version of you, or step into your full height and risk losing them. I chose to grow. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel, demanding respect doesn't make you ungrateful, and walking away from toxicity, even when it shares your last name, doesn't make you a bad daughter. It makes you whole. The moment I stopped begging for validation, I made room for peace. The moment I stopped chasing their love, I found it elsewhere, in my marriage, in my chosen family, in myself. So if you're listening and you've been made to feel less by the people who should have loved you more, let me say this. You are not too sensitive, you are not too much, you are enough. And the moment you believe that, everything changes. Have you ever had to set boundaries with your own family to protect your peace? What did that moment look like for you, and how did it change your relationships or your sense of self? I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Let's talk about choosing ourselves, even when it's hard.